Dumbleyung is a wheatbelt town, located about 270 kilometres from the capital city of Perth. The town is located close to the lake of the same name, and the lake is the largest body of inland water in southern Western Australia. It covers an area of about 13 by 7 kilometres. Water levels in the lake vary widely depending on yearly rainfall, and some years it can be bone dry, while others it fills to capacity. In 1964, Donald Campbell set the water speed record in his boat Bluebird on Lake Dumbleyung. He achieved the remarkable speed of 444.66 kilometres an hour, which is also sometimes quoted as 444.71 kilometres per hour. Campbell died in England just 2 years later, as he was trying to break the record he had set in the Australian outback. A memorial to Campbell stands on top of Pussycat Hill, and a bust was created to commemorate this daredevil speed seeker. The monument by the lake is made of granite and was designed in the shape of Western Australia. Nearby, a model of the Bluebird was once illuminated by the sun shining through a hole drilled in the granite on the anniversary of the day of the world record. Sadly, in a world where there is little respect, the plaque on the monument and the model of the Bluebird were stolen. A replica of Campbell's Bluebird was unveiled in Dumbleyung on New Year's Eve 2014. There have been attempts over the years to stock the lake with fish, but the unreliable nature of rain in the area has meant that the lake has completely dried out a number of times, and no fish are believed to survive. Today, where settlers once described fertile land with grasses and trees, there's little but dead trees and barren soil. Salination, a problem that occurs throughout the wheatbelt, has destroyed large parts of a once productive area. The emblem adopted by the Shire is that of a duck about to land. The original design was arrived at by holding a competition, which was won by Leslie, wait for it, Walduck. In 1843, Lefroy and Landor, with their native guide Cowett, took 6 days to reach Lake Norring, near Wagin. Shortly afterwards, Cowett reached the limits of his tribe's territory and could go no further. Luckily, the explorers met 2 other natives who were able to guide them further east. It was then that they found Lake Dumbleyung. It was then referred to as Dumbleyung, but there are some reports that say the lake appears on a surveyor's map as Condoning Lake in 1839. Henry Landor described the discovery in his journal. After riding 10 miles, we came in sight of Dumbleyung, the largest of the lakes, 13 miles by 7 or 8. It is, like the others, shallow, with many low islands, in varied and beautiful form. On the northern and eastern shores there is a good grazing country down to the lake, ending in precipitous banks, and extending over the hills 2 or 3 miles distant from the lake. The water is salt, and the shore long, flat and muddy, on which we saw the impressions of 2 stray horses and a foal. The natives knew of no further lakes to the east, and they too were unwilling to leave their tribal lands, so Lefroy and Landor returned to York. George Kersley took up the first grazing lease in the area in 1875, when the area around the lake was reported as rich and fertile. The name of the lake is said to be a corruption of the Aboriginal word Dumbleyung, which means place of large water. As Dumbleyung was on the route to the goldfields, some enterprising farmers would load their wagons with supplies and take them out to the goldfields and auction the contents. The area also had small stands of sandalwood. They were too small for sandalwood cutters to bother with, but they were a welcome source of income for the early settlers. The gold rushes of the 1880s drew many people to WA, and the government was keen to keep them here once they decided to leave the goldfields. To this end, land was made easily available and support given in the form of loans by the Agricultural Bank. By 1900, most of the land north of Lake Dumbleyung had been leased, and in the following 15 years, the land south and east was also taken up in pastoral leases. John Cronin appears to have been the first permanent settler, taking up land 6 miles north of the lake in 1878. The first town started to develop at a place called Nippering, but with the arrival of the rail terminus at Dumbleyung, people gravitated to the rail line, and Nippering ceased to exist. The town site was declared in 1907, although some sources declare it as 1906. This turns out to be because the initial survey was rejected for some reason, and it was redone the following year. The railway arrived in 1907, and the road board was established 2 years later. The local hotel was constructed in 1912, and the town grew to be a major service centre. It was not only the first pioneers who did it tough, though. After World War II, there was a wave of new Australians from all over Europe who migrated to Australia. Heidi Petrick and her husband Tony arrived in 1951, and Heidi wrote, "What a time it was to arrive. Late one summer evening in 1951, and not a soul in sight. At least the stars were out in their multitudes, as though sent by God to welcome us, illuminating the vast sky and the earth below. But oh God, this cannot be our future home, surely. Is this why we left Bavaria to come to Australia?" This was what I was thinking to myself, and trying hard not to cry, as I looked at the house. Is this really our home? It was built at the bottom of a yard, so small, surrounded by weeds and grass so plentiful and tall. No fence, just wire and posts. Everything felt and looked strange, unknown, God-forsaken, lost and forlorn. Just as I felt. "Tony, how could you do this to us?" I turned to my husband to ask. But not a word passed my lips. As I looked into his smiling, proud face, how was I supposed to know that most of the new Australians who had settled here were living in tents along the railway line? Today, Dumbleyung remains an important service centre for the surrounding farmlands. It's an attractive town with good facilities, and the local hotel is one of the most iconic in Western Australia. It is somewhat reminiscent of the Queenslander style of hotels that are so common in that state. Travellers in self-contained RVs and caravans can stay at the hotel car park for free as long as they spend some money at the hotel. There is also a free 72-hour RV stop for self-contained vehicles at the local sports ground, not far behind the hotel. For those without self-contained vehicles, there's a great local caravan park with all the usual facilities. There are other styles of accommodation in town, including at the local hotel, that has some very reasonably priced rooms. The local Community Resource Centre is housed in the old post office building, and you will find a lot of interesting information, plus some friendly locals to help answer any questions you may have about the area.